The executive jet sat on the tarmac at Reagan National Airport, engines running, passengers growing impatient. Inside the cabin, Senator Patricia Blackwood checked her Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. Across from her, tech billionaire Marcus Sterling tapped his fingers against his leather briefcase, while pharmaceutical heiress Diana Crawford stared out the window with barely concealed irritation. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. What's the holdup? Sterling demanded, his voice cutting through the cabin's tense silence. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing an unexpected delay with our flight clearance. Air traffic control is sorting through some complications. None of them knew that 3 miles away, in a cramped basement office beneath the Federal Aviation Administration building, a man they'd never bothered to learn the name of held their fate in his hands. Jake Morrison had been invisible his entire life, and he'd grown comfortable with it. At 34, he worked the night shift as a Level 2 air traffic clearance specialist, a job title so bureaucratic that even he sometimes forgot what it meant. While the tower controllers got the glory of guiding planes through takeoffs and landings, Jake sat in the basement, processing flight plans and managing clearances for the hundreds of aircraft that moved through Washington, D.C.'s airspace every day. His workspace was a testament to organized chaos. 3 monitors displayed constantly updating flight data, weather patterns, and restricted airspace notifications. Empty coffee cups formed small cities across his desk, and a half-eaten sandwich from yesterday still sat wrapped in its deli paper. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the windowless room feel like a submarine. Jake's colleagues on the day shift barely acknowledged him during shift changes. To them, he was just another night owl who preferred the quiet hours when the airport wasn't buzzing with activity. They didn't know about his master's degree in aerospace engineering, or that he'd once dreamed of designing aircraft before student loans and life circumstances led him to this basement. What they really didn't know was that Jake Morrison held one of the highest security clearances in the federal government. It hadn't been intentional. 5 years earlier, a bureaucratic mix-up during a routine background check had accidentally flagged him for a top-secret/SCI clearance review. Instead of correcting the error, Jake had decided to go through with it, curious about the process. The investigation was thorough. FBI agents interviewed his high school teachers, former neighbors, even his ex-girlfriend from college. They combed through his financial records, his internet history, his library checkout logs. Jake passed with flying colors. He was exactly what the security apparatus looked for: reliable, debt-free, no foreign contacts, no criminal record, no vices beyond an occasional beer, and an addiction to obscure historical documentaries. The clearance officer noted in his file that Morrison was exceptionally trustworthy and, quote, demonstrates unusual discretion for his age and position. The clearance came with access to classified databases that most air traffic controllers never saw. Jake could view real-time information about military aircraft movements, diplomatic flights, and what the government euphemistically called special air missions. He saw which planes carried senators to secret briefings, which routes were used for witness protection relocations, and which aircraft were registered to shell companies that didn't officially exist. Jake never abused this access. He did his job, processed his clearances, and went home to his 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington, where he lived alone with his cat, Tesla, and a collection of aviation history books that filled every available shelf. But on this particular Tuesday night in October, that security clearance was about to change everything. The request came through at 11:47 p.m., buried in the routine stack of flight plan modifications that crossed Jake's desk every hour. Executive Jet N847GX was requesting priority clearance for immediate departure from Reagan National to a private airfield in Montana. The flight plan listed 4 passengers, and when Jake pulled up the manifest, he recognized the names immediately. Senator Patricia Blackwood, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee; Marcus Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, the largest defense contractor in the country; Diana Crawford, whose pharmaceutical company had exclusive contracts with the Department of Defense; and Dr. Alan Reeves, whose name Jake recognized from classified briefings as the government's top bioweapons specialist. Under normal circumstances, Jake would have processed the clearance automatically. VIP flights got priority treatment, especially when they involved people with this level of political and economic influence. But something in the passenger manifest triggered a flag in the classified database. Jake's fingers hesitated over his keyboard as he accessed the restricted files. What he found there made his coffee go cold. 3 weeks earlier, a whistleblower had contacted the Inspector General's office with allegations about an illegal bioweapons program. The complaint detailed secret meetings between defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and government officials. It described research that violated international treaties, funding that had been hidden from congressional oversight, and test subjects who had never consented to experimental procedures. The whistleblower's identity was protected, but the complaint included specific details about a planned meeting where the conspirators would discuss damage control. The meeting was scheduled for October 15th, today's date, at a private facility in Montana that was registered to a shell company controlled by Sterling Dynamics. Jake stared at his screen, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The 4 passengers on that jet weren't just powerful people traveling together by coincidence. They were the central figures in a conspiracy that could end careers, topple governments, and potentially harm thousands of innocent people. His hands trembled slightly as he accessed another classified database, this one maintained by the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. There it was, an active investigation into the bioweapons program, with arrest warrants that had been sealed pending further evidence gathering. The investigation was being led by Special Agent Sarah Chen, who had been building a case for months, while the suspects remained unaware they were being watched. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. "Hey Morrison, Sterling's people are calling about their flight clearance. Can you expedite? They're getting antsy." In the past, Jake would have immediately processed the request. He was nobody special, just a guy who moved papers around in a basement office. His job was to follow procedures, not to make decisions that could affect powerful people's lives. But as he sat in that fluorescent-lit room, surrounded by the quiet hum of computers and the distant rumble of aircraft overhead, Jake realized that sometimes being nobody was exactly what the moment required. Nobody expected the night shift clerk to know about classified investigations. Nobody thought the basement dweller would have access to sensitive intelligence. Nobody imagined that the invisible man processing their flight plan would be the one person in a position to stop them. Jake Morrison picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he'd never called before. FBI Counterintelligence Agent Chen speaking. "Agent Chen, this is Jake Morrison with FAA Air Traffic Control. I have information about your bioweapons investigation that you need to hear right now." Agent Sarah Chen answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with the alertness of someone accustomed to late-night crisis calls. Jake could hear keyboards clicking in the background and the muffled voices of other agents working through the night. "This is Jake Morrison, FAA Air Traffic Control," he repeated, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm looking at a flight clearance request for N847GX. Your targets are trying to leave the country." The line went quiet, except for the background noise. Jake could practically hear Chen's mind racing. "Hold on." Her voice became muffled as she covered the phone. "Richardson, pull up everything on the Sterling flight, now." She came back on the line. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to listen very carefully. How much do you know about our investigation?" Jake's fingers moved across his keyboard, pulling up additional data streams. "I know about the bioweapons program. I know about the illegal testing. And I know that Blackwood, Sterling, Crawford, and Reeves are sitting on a plane right now, waiting for clearance to fly to a private airfield in Montana that your investigation has flagged as a meeting location." "Jesus!" Chen's professionalism cracked for just a moment. "How long can you delay their clearance?" Jake looked at his screen, where a new message was flashing. Another request from the pilot, this one marked urgent. "They're getting impatient. My supervisor is getting calls. I can maybe buy you 30 minutes before someone starts asking questions I can't answer." "That's not enough time. We need..." Chen paused and Jake heard rapid conversation in the background. Mr. Morrison, are you willing to help us with something that goes beyond your normal job duties? Jake thought about his quiet life, his routine, his carefully maintained invisibility. Then he thought about the classified reports he'd read, the references to test subjects and illegal experiments. What do you need? We need you to clear their flight. The request hit Jake like a physical blow. What? But I thought… Let me explain. We've been building this case for 8 months, but we don't have enough evidence for convictions. If they reach that facility in Montana, they'll destroy everything: documents, hard drives, biological samples. But if they think they're safe, if they believe they've escaped scrutiny, Jake understood immediately. You want them to incriminate themselves. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The Montana facility is completely under surveillance. Every conversation will be recorded, every document they handle will be photographed. They're planning to destroy evidence, but they're also planning to coordinate their stories and decide how to handle the investigation. That coordination meeting is what we need to make our case airtight. Jake's other monitor chimed with an incoming message from the control tower. His supervisor, Dennis Walsh, was asking for an update on the Sterling flight. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. There's something else, Chen continued. We have an undercover agent on that plane. She's been working on this case for 6 months, and she's finally gained their trust. If we move too early, we lose her and the intelligence she's gathered. An undercover agent? Who? I can't tell you that over an unsecured line. But she's counting on this flight happening. If we abort now, months of work disappear. Jake's secure phone buzzed with another call, Walsh again. He let it go to voicemail, but he knew he was running out of time. Around him, the basement office felt smaller, the fluorescent lights brighter, the weight of decision heavier than any aircraft he'd ever guided through the sky. If I clear this flight, Jake said slowly, and something goes wrong in Montana, those people could disappear forever. Private airfield, private security, unlimited resources. That's not going to happen. We have assets in place, surveillance teams, contingency plans. The moment they finish their meeting and try to leave Montana, we'll be waiting. But we need that meeting to happen first. Jake pulled up the flight plan again, studying the route. Reagan National to Glacier Park International, then a helicopter transfer to the private facility. Total flight time, 4 hours and 23 minutes. By dawn, the most powerful conspiracy in recent memory would either be in federal custody or have vanished into a network of safe houses and private islands that the government might never penetrate. His phone rang again. This time it was a direct call from the tower. Morrison, this is Controller Davis. I've got Sterling's pilot on the radio demanding to know what the holdup is. They're threatening to file a complaint with the FAA administrator. Walsh wants this cleared now. Jake covered the phone and spoke to Chen. I'm out of time. My supervisor is about to override my clearance anyway. Then make the call, Mr. Morrison. Clear the flight. Jake stared at his keyboard, cursor blinking in the clearance authorization field. Everything in his training told him to follow orders, process the paperwork, stay invisible. But everything in his conscience told him that some decisions couldn't be delegated to supervisors or procedures. Agent Chen, I need something from you first. What? I need to know that if this goes wrong, if these people escape justice because I helped them leave the country, you'll make sure the truth comes out. I need to know that my name will be in the report that explains how a night shift clerk in a basement office became complicit in letting war criminals fly away. Chen's voice softened. Mr. Morrison, you're not complicit, you're the reason we're going to stop them. Without your call tonight, they would have disappeared anyway, and we'd have spent years wondering what happened to our investigation. Jake typed his authorization code into the system. The clearance approval is populated automatically, ready to be transmitted to the control tower and the waiting aircraft. There's something else you should know, Chen said. The whistleblower who started this investigation, the person who risked everything to expose this conspiracy, they specifically mentioned that low-level federal employees were the only ones who could be trusted, because they were the only ones with access but no stake in covering things up. You're exactly who they hoped would step forward. Jake's finger hovered over the submit button. On his other monitor, he could see the aircraft's position on the tarmac, engines running, passengers waiting. Senator Blackwood was probably checking her watch again. Sterling was probably making angry phone calls. Crawford was probably calculating how much this delay might cost her in legal exposure. None of them knew that their fate was being decided by someone they'd never met, in a basement they'd never seen, by a man whose entire career had been built on being forgettable. Jake pressed submit. Flight N847GX, you are cleared for departure. Direct routing to Glacier Park International, Montana. Climb and maintain flight level 350. Contact departure control on frequency 119.1. The message transmitted automatically to the control tower. Within minutes, the executive jet would be taxiing toward the runway, carrying its passengers toward what they believed was safety, but what was actually the most sophisticated law enforcement trap in FBI history. It's done, Jake told Chen. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. You just helped make the biggest case of the decade. As Jake watched the aircraft's transponder signal begin moving across his screen, he realized that for the first time in his life, being nobody had made him somebody who mattered. The executive jet lifted off from Reagan National at 12:23 a.m., its navigation lights disappearing into the darkness above the Potomac River. Jake watched the transponder signal on his screen as Flight N847GX climbed to cruising altitude, following the flight path that would take it across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and into the heartland of America. But Jake's attention wasn't on the routine flight tracking anymore. Agent Chen had patched him into the FBI's Tactical Communications Network, and his basement office had suddenly become a nerve center for one of the most complex operations in Bureau history. Morrison, this is Special Agent Marcus Webb, Tactical Coordinator, a new voice crackled through Jake's secure headset. Agent Chen briefed me on your situation. We're going to need you to maintain communication throughout this operation. Jake's screen now displayed additional windows he'd never seen before: real-time satellite imagery, encrypted communication feeds, and what appeared to be personnel tracking data for dozens of federal agents. His security clearance had unlocked access to operational intelligence that most FBI field agents never saw. What exactly is happening out there? Jake asked, watching as new data streams populated his monitors. We have 47 agents positioned around the Montana facility, Webb explained. Surveillance teams, tactical response units, technical specialists. The subjects think they're flying to a secure location, but they're actually entering the most monitored square mile in the continental United States. On Jake's screen, a detailed satellite view of the Montana facility appeared. The complex looked innocuous from above, a collection of modern buildings surrounded by forest, with a helipad and what appeared to be a small laboratory facility. But as Webb explained the operation, Jake realized the scope of what was unfolding. The facility has been under our surveillance for 3 months, Webb continued. We've identified every entry point, every communication system, every potential escape route. But most importantly, we've confirmed that this is where they've been conducting the illegal research. Jake leaned forward in his chair, studying the aerial images. What kind of research? Bioweapons development using unwitting test subjects. Military personnel, federal prisoners, even volunteers for clinical trials who thought they were testing conventional medications. The research violated every international treaty on biological weapons, and the cover-up goes straight to the top of 3 major government agencies. The weight of what Jake had enabled began to settle on his shoulders. These weren't just corrupt officials fleeing justice. They were war criminals whose work had potentially harmed hundreds of innocent people. His phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor Walsh. Good work on the Sterling clearance. Smooth sailing from here. Jake almost laughed at the irony. Walsh thought the night had ended successfully, with another VIP flight processed without incident. He had no idea that his subordinate had just become a crucial player in the largest counterintelligence operation of the decade. Morrison, we need you to understand something. Agent Chen's voice returned to the channel. The undercover agent I mentioned? She's been working under deep cover for 6 months. And she's finally gained access to the inner circle. Tonight's meeting is her chance to gather the final evidence we need. Who is she? Dr. Rachel Martinez, Officially, she's a biochemist consulting on pharmaceutical applications for defense contracts. Unofficially, she's one of our best undercover operatives, and she's documented everything from financial transactions to test subject records. Jake pulled up the passenger manifest again, studying the names. But there are only 4 people listed on the flight. Check again. Jake refreshed the data, and a 5th name appeared on the manifest, Dr. Rachel Martinez, listed as a technical consultant, added to the flight at the last minute. The conspiracy members trusted her enough to include her in their most sensitive discussions, completely unaware that she was gathering evidence that would destroy them. She's wearing a wire, carrying recording devices, and has a photographic memory for details, Chen explained. But she's also completely isolated once that plane lands. If something goes wrong, if they discover who she really is. Jake didn't need her to finish the sentence. Dr. Martinez would disappear into the same network of safe houses and private security that protected the other conspirators. How do I help? By maintaining communication and being our eyes in the sky, Webb responded. Your air traffic control systems give us real-time tracking that our other surveillance can't match. If they deviate from the flight plan, if they try to change destinations, if anything goes wrong, you'll be the first to know. Jake's screen chimed with an update. The aircraft was passing through Ohio airspace, maintaining altitude and speed, following the planned route exactly. Everything appeared normal, but Jake now understood that normal was an illusion carefully maintained by dozens of federal agents working through the night. There's something else, Chen said. The reason we chose tonight for this operation isn't just because of their meeting. Our intelligence indicates they're planning to destroy the Montana facility after tonight, burn it down, eliminate all evidence, and scatter to predetermined safe locations around the world. So this is our only chance. Our only chance, she confirmed. Jake spent the next hour monitoring multiple data streams while the aircraft crossed the Midwest. He watched weather reports, tracked military aircraft that might interfere with the surveillance operation, and maintained contact with FBI coordinators positioned across 3 time zones. At 2:15 a.m., the aircraft began its descent into Montana airspace. Jake's screen showed the plane dropping altitude as it approached Glacier Park International Airport, where a helicopter waited to transport the passengers to the private facility. Morrison, this is Agent Torres, surveillance team leader, a new voice joined the communication channel. We have visual confirmation of the aircraft approaching. All ground teams are in position. Jake watched the transponder signal descend through the darkness above Montana's wilderness. Below, he knew, Dr. Martinez was preparing for the most dangerous hours of her career. The other passengers were probably reviewing their plans for destroying evidence and coordinating their defense against the federal investigation. None of them suspected that every word they'd spoken since takeoff had been recorded by sophisticated listening devices, that their destination was surrounded by federal agents, or that their entire conspiracy was about to unravel because a night shift clerk in a Washington basement had made a phone call. Aircraft is on final approach, Jake reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Copy that, Morrison. Welcome to the biggest takedown of your career. As Flight N847GX touched down in Montana, Jake realized that his invisible life was over. After tonight, he would never again be just another forgotten bureaucrat processing paperwork in a basement office. The conspiracy members had spent months planning their escape from justice, but they'd never considered that their fate would be decided by someone they'd never bothered to notice. The plane taxied to a stop, and Jake's screen showed the engines winding down. In a few minutes, the passengers would transfer to the waiting helicopter for the final leg of their journey into the most sophisticated trap in FBI history. Jake Morrison, the nobody from the basement, had just changed the course of American justice. The helicopter's rotors cut through the Montana air at 3:47 a.m., carrying 5 passengers toward a facility that none of them fully understood. Jake tracked the aircraft's progress on his enhanced surveillance display, watching as it approached coordinates that had been meticulously mapped by federal agents over the previous 3 months. Heat signatures confirmed, Agent Torres reported through Jake's headset, 5 passengers aboard the helicopter, maintaining expected flight path to target location. Jake's basement office had been transformed into something resembling mission control. Additional monitors displayed thermal imaging, communication intercepts, and real-time positioning data for the 47 federal agents now surrounding the Montana compound. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but adrenaline kept him alert as he witnessed the final phase of an operation years in the making. Dr. Rachel Martinez sat in the helicopter's cabin, her recorder disguised as a medical device tucked into her briefcase. For 6 months, she had carefully built her cover identity as a biochemist specializing in pharmaceutical applications for military use. The conspiracy members trusted her expertise and valued her discretion, never suspecting that every conversation had been documented and transmitted to FBI analysts. Dr. Martinez is maintaining her cover perfectly, Agent Chen updated Jake. Her recordings from the flight have already given us enough evidence to prosecute, but we need what happens in that facility to build the complete case. Senator Blackwood stared out the helicopter window at the forest below, her mind focused on damage control strategies. The whistleblower's complaint had shaken her confidence, but she believed tonight's meeting would allow them to coordinate their response and eliminate any remaining evidence. Her political career depended on containing the scandal before it reached the media. Marcus Sterling reviewed financial documents on his tablet, calculating the cost of shutting down the Montana operation. His defense contracting empire had generated billions in revenue from the illegal bioweapons research, but he was prepared to sacrifice one facility to protect the larger network. He had already arranged for similar operations in 3 other countries, beyond the reach of American law enforcement. Diana Crawford checked her encrypted phone for updates from her laboratory directors. Her pharmaceutical company had provided the chemical compounds used in the illegal testing, generating enormous profits while hiding behind legitimate government contracts. She had spent weeks preparing to transfer critical research data to overseas facilities, ensuring that the work would continue even if the Montana lab was destroyed. Dr. Alan Reeves clutched a hard drive containing backup files of every experiment conducted over the past 2 years. As the government's top bioweapons specialist, he had orchestrated the research program from within the federal bureaucracy, using his security clearance to hide the project from oversight committees and inspector generals. The hard drive represented his insurance policy, leverage against anyone who might try to sacrifice him to save themselves. Jake watched the helicopter's approach on his screen while listening to encrypted communications between surveillance teams. The level of coordination was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Agents were positioned in the forest surrounding the facility, technical specialists had tapped into the compound's communication systems, and satellite surveillance provided real-time imagery of every movement. "Morrison, this is Agent Reynolds, Technical Operations," a new voice joined the communication channel. "We're picking up electronic signatures from the facility that suggest they're preparing to destroy hard drives and paper documents. They're moving faster than we anticipated." Jake checked the helicopter's estimated arrival time. "They'll be on the ground in 12 minutes. Is that enough time?" "It has to be. Dr. Martinez knows she needs to delay any document destruction until we can gather the evidence. But if they suspect her cover?" The implication hung in the air. Rachel Martinez was walking into a room with 4 people who had murdered test subjects, covered up war crimes, and corrupted federal agencies. If they discovered her true identity, she would become another casualty of their conspiracy. Jake's screen displayed a new alert. The helicopter was beginning its descent toward the facility's landing pad. Ground-based cameras showed figures moving inside the compound, preparing for the arrival of their collaborators. Lights illuminated windows throughout the complex, suggesting that support staff were also present for tonight's critical meeting. "We have visual confirmation of additional personnel at the facility," Torres reported. "At least 8 people inside the main building, plus security personnel at perimeter positions." Jake realized that the conspiracy was larger than the 4 passengers he had been tracking. The Montana facility housed an entire network of researchers, administrators, and guards who had participated in the illegal program. Tonight's operation would expose not just the leadership but the complete infrastructure that had enabled years of criminal activity. "Dr. Martinez is about to enter the most dangerous phase of her mission," Chen informed Jake. "Once she's inside that facility, our ability to extract her safely depends on maintaining perfect surveillance and timing our intervention exactly right. The helicopter touched down at 4:03 a.m., its rotors gradually winding down as the passengers prepared to disembark. Jake watched thermal imaging displays that showed 5 figures exiting the aircraft and walking toward the main building. Dr. Martinez maintained her position slightly behind the others, her concealed recording equipment capturing audio of their conversation as they entered the compound. Recording devices are active and transmitting, Reynolds confirmed. We're getting clear audio from Dr. Martinez's position. Jake could hear fragments of conversation through his headset, discussions about document destruction, plans for relocating research operations, and strategies for discrediting the whistleblower. The conspiracy members spoke with casual confidence, believing they were safe from surveillance in their remote mountain facility. What they didn't know was that the facility's communication systems had been compromised for months. Every phone call, every email, every internal message had been intercepted and analyzed by federal investigators. The compound they believed was their sanctuary had actually become the most monitored location in the country. Movement in the laboratory wing, Torres reported. Subjects are proceeding to what appears to be a conference room adjacent to the main research facility. Jake's screen showed a detailed floor plan of the building, with red dots indicating the positions of all personnel inside. Dr. Martinez appeared as a green dot, moving with the conspiracy members toward a room that FBI analysts had identified as the location where the most sensitive planning discussions typically occurred. "This is it," Chen said, her voice tense with anticipation. "Everything we've worked toward for the past 8 months comes down to what happens in that room over the next few hours." Jake stared at his monitors, watching dots move across a digital representation of a building where the fate of American justice was being decided. In a few hours, either the largest bioweapons conspiracy in modern history would be exposed and prosecuted, or its architects would successfully destroy the evidence and disappear forever. The nobody in the basement had become the guardian of one of the most important operations in FBI history, and the weight of that responsibility settled over him like a heavy blanket as the Montana facility prepared to reveal its secrets. The conference room at the Montana facility felt like a war room, its walls lined with monitors displaying classified research data that had never been intended for public scrutiny. Dr. Rachel Martinez took her seat at the mahogany table, her concealed recording equipment capturing every word as the most dangerous conspiracy in modern American history prepared to make its final moves. Jake monitored the situation from his basement office, his screens now displaying real-time audio transcripts as the FBI's voice recognition software converted the intercepted conversations into readable text. What he saw made his blood run cold. "The test results from the Portland facility exceeded our projections," Dr. Reeves announced, spreading classified documents across the table. "We achieved a 93% infection rate with the modified strain, and symptoms manifested within 6 hours of exposure." Senator Blackwood leaned forward, studying charts that detailed human experimentation on a scale that Jake had never imagined. "What about the antidote protocols? Can we guarantee protection for essential personnel?" "The vaccine we developed provides complete immunity," Diana Crawford responded, her pharmaceutical expertise evident in her confident tone. "We've tested it on over 200 subjects, without a single failure. Military leadership, key government officials, and designated corporate executives would be completely protected." Jake's hands trembled as he read the transcripts appearing on his screen. These weren't theoretical discussions about potential weapons. They were reviewing the results of actual biological warfare tests conducted on American citizens. "Agent Chen," Jake whispered into his secure microphone, "are you seeing this?" "We're recording everything, Morrison. This is exactly what we needed to build an airtight case." Marcus Sterling pulled up financial projections on a tablet, displaying revenue estimates that ran into the hundreds of billions. "The international markets are prepared to pay unprecedented amounts for this technology. Our contacts in 3 foreign governments have already committed to purchase agreements, and private military contractors are offering premium rates for exclusive access." Dr. Martinez maintained her composed facade while documenting the most damning evidence the FBI had ever obtained. Her hidden camera captured classified documents, financial records, and test results that proved systematic violations of international law. "What's our timeline for facility liquidation?" Blackwood asked. Her political instincts focused on eliminating evidence before congressional investigators could arrive. "Thermal charges are positioned throughout the laboratory wing," Dr. Reeves explained. "Complete destruction of all physical evidence can be accomplished within 30 minutes of activation. Digital records will be simultaneously wiped from all connected servers." Jake watched his screen as new intelligence poured in from surveillance teams. The facility wasn't just preparing to destroy evidence. It was rigged for complete obliteration that would eliminate any trace of the illegal research program. "Morrison, this is Agent Webb," the tactical coordinator's voice crackled through Jake's headset. "We're detecting unusual electronic activity throughout the facility. They're activating systems we haven't seen before." Jake pulled up additional monitoring displays, showing electromagnetic signatures and thermal readings from inside the compound. "What kind of systems?" "Unknown. But the power consumption just spiked to levels that suggest they're preparing something major." Inside the conference room, Diana Crawford accessed a secure terminal and began entering authorization codes. "I'm activating the Phoenix Protocol," she announced. "All research data will be transferred to overseas servers within the next hour, and backup samples will be shipped to our facilities in 3 countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States." Dr. Martinez realized that the conspiracy was more extensive than even the FBI had suspected. The Montana facility was just one node in a global network of illegal bioweapons research, and tonight's meeting was coordinating the preservation of that network, even as they sacrificed the American operations. "We have 12 test subjects still alive in the secure wing," Dr. Reeves reported, consulting a classified roster. "Disposal protocols are ready for implementation once we've completed data transfer." Jake's stomach lurched as he read those words. 12 human beings were being held in the facility, victims of illegal experiments who were about to be murdered to eliminate witnesses. "Agent Chen, they're about to kill the test subjects," Jake transmitted urgently. "We're accelerating our timeline," Chen responded. "All teams, prepare for immediate intervention." Senator Blackwood stood and walked to a window overlooking the forest, unaware that federal agents were positioned within 50 yards of her location. "The whistleblower complaint has created more exposure than we anticipated. Congressional hearings are inevitable, and the media attention will be unprecedented. That's why we're implementing total information control," Sterling explained, activating a communications jamming system that was designed to prevent any signals from leaving the facility. "Once we begin the destruction sequence, this compound will be electronically isolated until the operation is complete." What Sterling didn't know was that the FBI's surveillance equipment had been designed to operate through exactly this type of jamming. The federal agents surrounding the facility continued to receive real-time intelligence, even as the conspiracy members believed they had achieved complete security. Dr. Martinez checked her watch, knowing that her extraction window was rapidly closing. The evidence she had gathered was sufficient to prosecute everyone in the room, but the 12 test subjects needed immediate rescue before the disposal protocols could be implemented. "I need to review the biological samples before we destroy them," she said, maintaining her cover while positioning herself for the dangerous final phase of her mission. "My pharmaceutical analysis requires direct examination of the active compounds. Access to the containment wing is restricted during lockdown procedures," Dr. Reeves responded suspiciously. "All samples will be incinerated along with the rest of the facility." Jake watched his screen as tension escalated inside the conference room. Dr. Martinez was pushing the boundaries of her cover identity, but rescuing the test subjects required her to gain access to the secure wing where they were being held. "Actually, Dr. Martinez raises an important point," Diana Crawford interjected. "We should document the final efficacy rates before destruction. It will help us optimize the formulations for our overseas operations." Dr. Reeves hesitated, his paranoia warring with the practical need for complete data collection. "Very well. But security protocols remain in effect. Dr. Martinez will be escorted by armed personnel at all times." Jake realized that Dr. Martinez was about to enter the most dangerous area of the facility, where 12 innocent people were awaiting execution, and where any mistake could expose her true identity to armed guards. "All surveillance teams prepare for emergency extraction," Agent Webb commanded. "Dr. Martinez is entering the high-risk zone." As Rachel Martinez stood to follow Dr. Reeves toward the containment wing, she knew that the next 30 minutes would determine whether the largest bioweapons conspiracy in American history would be stopped, or whether she would become its final victim. Jake Morrison, watching from his basement office 3,000 miles away, had become the nerve center for an operation that would either save 12 innocent lives and expose a global conspiracy, or witness the destruction of evidence that could never be recovered. The containment wing of the Montana facility stretched beneath the main building like a hidden underground city. Dr. Martinez followed Dr. Reeves through sterile corridors lined with reinforced doors, each marked with clinical designations that masked the human suffering occurring behind them. 2 armed guards flanked their movement, their presence a constant reminder of how quickly her mission could turn lethal. Jake's monitors displayed the facility's architectural blueprints as surveillance teams tracked Dr. Martinez's descent into the most classified section of the compound. Heat signatures showed additional personnel throughout the underground complex: researchers, guards, and what appeared to be medical staff maintaining the illegal experiments. Morrison were losing some audio clarity as they moved deeper underground, Agent Reynolds reported through Jake's headset. The facility's shielding is more sophisticated than our initial assessments indicated. Jake adjusted his monitoring equipment, struggling to maintain clear surveillance feeds as Dr. Martinez entered areas that had been specifically designed to block external observation. I'm showing 12 distinct heat signatures in the containment cells. The test subjects are all still alive. Copy that. Emergency medical teams are standing by for immediate extraction once we breach the facility. Dr. Reeves stopped at a security checkpoint, entering biometric data that unlocked blast doors leading to the experimental wing. Dr. Martinez, what you're about to see represents 5 years of breakthrough research that will revolutionize biological warfare capabilities. Rachel Martinez steeled herself for what lay beyond those doors, knowing that her reaction would determine whether her cover remained intact. As they entered the containment area, she saw a nightmare that exceeded even the classified reports she had reviewed during her FBI training. 12 isolation chambers lined the corridor, each containing a person in various stages of experimental infection. Some appeared comatose, connected to life support systems that monitored their biological responses to weaponized pathogens. Others showed signs of consciousness, their eyes tracking movement with expressions of terror and confusion. Subject 7 has shown remarkable resilience to the modified strain, Dr. Reeves explained with clinical detachment, gesturing toward a young woman who appeared to be barely 20 years old. We've been able to test 17 different variants on her over the past 6 months. Dr. Martinez maintained her professional composure while her concealed camera documented evidence that would send shockwaves through the international community. These weren't volunteers or criminals. They were innocent people who had been kidnapped and subjected to biological experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics. "What's the demographic profile of your test population?" she asked, her voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. "Homeless individuals, illegal immigrants, patients from psychiatric facilities, people whose disappearances wouldn't trigger intensive investigations," Dr. Reeves responded matter-of-factly. "We've maintained a steady supply through partnerships with corrupt officials in various state agencies." Jake read the transcripts appearing on his screen, each word adding to the mountain of evidence that would destroy the conspiracy. But he also understood that documenting these crimes meant nothing if the test subjects didn't survive the next few hours. "Agent Webb, how long until breach?" Jake transmitted urgently. "Tactical teams are in position, but we need Dr. Martinez to clear the immediate area before we can move. The armed guards pose a significant threat to both her safety and the test subjects." Inside the containment wing, Dr. Martinez realized she needed to create distance between herself and the guards without arousing suspicion. "I'd like to examine the biological samples in your laboratory. The compounds we're developing for overseas markets will require precise replication of your formulations." Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. "Excellent thinking. The synthesis lab is through that corridor. Security, maintain position here while Dr. Martinez and I review the active compounds." As they moved away from the guards, Dr. Martinez activated a hidden transmitter that would signal the FBI teams positioned outside the facility. The rescue operation was about to begin, but success depended on precise timing and flawless execution. Jake watched his screens as surveillance teams reported their positions. Perimeter teams are breaching the outer security fence. Tactical units are advancing on the main building. Dr. Martinez has provided the extraction signal. Senator Blackwood, still in the upstairs conference room, received an alert on her secure phone. "We have a security breach," she announced to Sterling and Crawford. "Unknown personnel have penetrated the perimeter fence." Marcus Sterling activated emergency protocols, locking down the facility and initiating the evidence destruction sequence. All research data is being transferred to offshore servers. Physical destruction of the laboratory will commence in 15 minutes. Diana Crawford accessed the facility's containment systems, preparing to release lethal gas into the isolation chambers that would eliminate all test subjects within minutes. Disposal protocols are active. No witnesses will survive to testify about our research program. Jake realized that the FBI's rescue operation was racing against multiple countdown timers. The facility was simultaneously destroying evidence, transferring critical data to international locations, and preparing to murder 12 innocent people. "All teams, we have multiple time-critical threats," Agent Chen transmitted to the assault units. "Evidence destruction is underway, data transfer is in progress, and test subjects are in immediate danger." Dr. Martinez, now alone with Dr. Reeves in the synthesis laboratory, made her move. "Dr. Reeves, I need you to understand something. My name is Dr. Rachel Martinez, and I'm a federal agent. You're under arrest for crimes against humanity." Dr. Reeves reached for an emergency alarm, but Martinez was faster, using hand-to-hand combat training to subdue him before he could alert the guards. She secured his access cards and weapon, then activated her emergency beacon to guide FBI teams directly to her location. "Morrison, Dr. Martinez has revealed her identity and secured the laboratory," Agent Torres reported. "Breach teams are entering the main building now." Jake watched as his screen erupted with activity indicators. Federal agents were advancing through the facility from multiple directions, racing to reach the containment wing before the disposal protocols could be implemented. The armed guards at the isolation chambers received orders to begin immediate elimination of test subjects, but FBI tactical teams breached their position with flashbang grenades and non-lethal suppression tactics. Gunfire echoed through the underground corridors as federal agents fought to save lives while conspiracy members attempted to destroy evidence of their crimes. "Medical teams to the containment wing," Agent Webb commanded. "We have 12 critical patients requiring immediate evacuation and treatment." Senator Blackwood, Marcus Sterling, and Diana Crawford found themselves surrounded by federal agents as they attempted to flee through emergency exits. Their carefully planned escape routes had been anticipated and blocked by FBI teams who had studied the facility for months. "This is Agent Chen, FBI. You are all under arrest for conspiracy, murder, terrorism, and violations of international biological weapons treaties." Jake Morrison sat in his basement office, watching his monitors display the systematic dismantling of the largest bioweapons conspiracy in American history. The nobody who processed flight clearances had become the central coordinator for an operation that would save 12 innocent lives and expose crimes that reached the highest levels of government and industry. As federal agents secured the facility and began evacuating test subjects to emergency medical treatment, Jake realized that his invisible life was forever changed. The basement clerk had become a guardian of justice whose actions would resonate through courtrooms and congressional hearings for years to come. 6 months after the Montana raid, Jake Morrison stood before the Senate Intelligence Committee in a hearing room packed with reporters, federal prosecutors, and family members of the rescued test subjects. The basement office that had been his entire world now seemed like a distant memory as he prepared to deliver testimony that would reshape American intelligence oversight. "Mr. Morrison," Senator Elizabeth Harper addressed him from the committee chair, "your actions on the night of October 15th prevented what investigators have called the largest cover-up of war crimes in modern American history. Can you walk us through the decision-making process that led you to contact the FBI?" Jake adjusted his microphone, still uncomfortable with the attention but determined to ensure the truth was fully documented. Senator, I was just doing my job. Air traffic controllers have access to classified information because we need to coordinate with military operations and diplomatic flights. When I saw the passenger manifest and cross-referenced it with ongoing investigations, I realized that powerful people were trying to escape accountability. The hearing room was silent except for the clicking of cameras as Jake continued. What I discovered that night was that being nobody, being overlooked and underestimated, sometimes puts you in a position to see things that others miss. The conspiracy members never considered that a night shift clerk would have the clearance level and the moral courage to stop them. Committee member Senator Robert Chen leaned forward. The FBI has testified that without your intervention, the entire bioweapons network would have successfully relocated overseas, taking their research and their crimes beyond the reach of American justice. Can you explain how a single phone call prevented such a massive escape? Jake's response was measured but firm. The phone call didn't stop anything by itself. What stopped them was a system working the way it's supposed to work. Federal agents who had been building a case for months, an undercover operative who risked her life to gather evidence, and surveillance teams who were ready to act when the moment came. I just provided the timing and coordination they needed. Dr. Rachel Martinez, seated in the witness gallery, nodded as Jake spoke. Her 6 months undercover had provided the evidence that led to convictions for all 4 primary conspirators, plus 17 co-conspirators, including facility personnel, corrupt officials, and international contacts. Senator Harper consulted her notes. Mr. Morrison, the investigation has revealed that this conspiracy involved the systematic kidnapping and experimentation on American citizens. 12 people were rescued from the Montana facility, but FBI estimates suggest that over 200 people may have been victims of this program over 5 years. How do you process the magnitude of what you helped expose? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about the victims he had met during the investigation. Senator, I think about Maria Santos, who was homeless when they took her from a Seattle shelter. She survived 17 different biological experiments and is now working with researchers to develop treatments for the conditions they inflicted on her. I think about David Kim, a veteran with PTSD who they grabbed from a VA hospital. He's testified before Congress about the need for better protection of vulnerable populations. He paused, his voice growing stronger. These weren't random crimes. This was a systematic program to exploit people whose society had already forgotten. Homeless individuals, immigrants, psychiatric patients, people whose disappearances wouldn't be investigated. The same invisibility that made me useful to the FBI, I made them vulnerable to these criminals. The committee's ranking member, Senator Michael Torres, addressed the broader implications. Mr. Morrison, this case has led to reforms in security clearance oversight, air traffic control protocols, and interagency communication. But it's also raised questions about how such a massive conspiracy could operate for years without detection. What systemic changes do you believe are necessary? Jake had spent months thinking about this question. Senator, the problem wasn't lack of oversight. It was compartmentalization that prevented people from seeing the complete picture. I had access to flight manifests and classified databases, but no training to recognize patterns of criminal activity. Dr. Martinez had deep cover capabilities, but limited access to the financial networks that funded the conspiracy. Agent Chen had investigative authority, but needed real-time intelligence to coordinate the operation. He gestured toward the gallery, where FBI personnel sat. What made this operation successful was breaking down those compartments and allowing different parts of the federal government to work together. The reforms should focus on creating more opportunities for that kind of collaboration, not just adding more layers of bureaucracy. Senator Harper reviewed classified documents that had been declassified for the hearing. The evidence suggests that this conspiracy had international connections, spanning 12 countries and involving defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and government officials at the highest levels. Senator Blackwood has been convicted of treason and sentenced to life in prison. Marcus Sterling's defense empire has been dismantled, and he faces execution for war crimes. Diana Crawford has received multiple life sentences. Dr. Reeves has been sentenced to death for crimes against humanity. She looked directly at Jake. These were some of the most powerful people in America, with unlimited resources and extensive connections. How does it feel to know that your decision to make that phone call brought down such a massive network? Jake considered his response carefully. Senator, it doesn't feel like victory. 12 people were rescued, but we don't know how many others died before we could reach them. The conspiracy was stopped, but it operated for years before anyone noticed. Justice was served, but it came at a cost that no one should have had to pay. He paused, thinking about the responsibility that had changed his life. What I've learned is that democracy depends on ordinary people being willing to act when they see something wrong. Not because they're heroes or because they have special training, but because they recognize that some decisions can't be delegated to someone else. Dr. Martinez was called to testify next, describing her 6 months undercover and the evidence she had gathered. Her recordings from the Montana facility had provided prosecutors with documentation of every aspect of the conspiracy, from the kidnapping networks to the international money laundering operations. Mr. Morrison's coordination was crucial to the success of this operation, she testified. His air traffic control systems gave us real-time tracking capabilities that our other surveillance couldn't match. But more importantly, his willingness to trust federal agents he had never met, and to take responsibility for a decision that could have ended his career, made it possible for us to save those 12 lives. The hearing continued for 3 days, with testimony from rescued test subjects, FBI agents, international prosecutors, and family members of victims who had not survived. Jake's role evolved from witness to expert consultant as senators asked for his recommendations on intelligence reform and oversight procedures. On the final day of hearings, Senator Harper made a closing statement. Mr. Morrison, this committee has heard testimony about systematic failures in oversight, breakdowns in interagency communication, and corruption at the highest levels of government. But we've also heard about the power of individual conscience and the importance of ordinary citizens who refuse to look the other way when they encounter evidence of wrongdoing. She consulted her prepared remarks. The reforms recommended by this committee will strengthen intelligence oversight, improve coordination between agencies, and create new protections for whistleblowers and vulnerable populations. But the most important recommendation is that federal employees at every level should understand that they have both the authority and the responsibility to report criminal activity, regardless of who is involved. Jake was offered promotions, transfers to prestigious positions, and opportunities to work directly with FBI counterintelligence operations. Instead, he chose to return to air traffic control, but in a new role that bridged operational duties with security oversight. His basement office was replaced with a position in the FAA's Intelligence Coordination Center, where his experience with classified databases and interagency communication made him a valuable asset for preventing future security breaches. He worked closely with FBI, CIA, and NSA personnel to identify suspicious flight patterns and passenger manifests that might indicate criminal activity. Maria Santos, one of the rescued test subjects, became an advocate for victims of medical experimentation and worked with Congress to establish stronger protections for vulnerable populations. David Kim used his military background to help create new training programs for VA personnel to recognize signs of patient exploitation. Dr. Martinez received the FBI's highest honors for her undercover work and was promoted to head a new task force focused on identifying and dismantling international bioweapons networks. Her experience in the Montana facility led to cooperative agreements with law enforcement agencies in 15 countries. The international implications of the conspiracy continued to unfold for years. 3 foreign governments fell when their connections to the bioweapons network were exposed. The United Nations established new protocols for investigating biological weapons violations. International criminal courts prosecuted dozens of co-conspirators who had fled the United States. Jake's personal life changed dramatically as well. The publicity surrounding the case made him recognizable to airport personnel and federal employees across the country. He married an FBI analyst he met during the investigation, and they bought a house in Virginia with windows that let in natural light and a garden where they could grow vegetables. But Jake never forgot the lesson of that October night in the basement office. Power and influence could corrupt even the most trusted institutions, but ordinary people with access to information and the courage to act could still make a difference. Years later, when he spoke to new air traffic controllers about security protocols and the importance of interagency communication, Jake always emphasized that being nobody, being overlooked and underestimated, was sometimes exactly what the situation required. Democracy doesn't depend on heroes, he would tell them. It depends on people who are willing to make the right choice when no one is watching, even when that choice might cost them everything they've worked for. The basement office where Jake Morrison had been invisible was eventually converted into a training center for federal employees, learning about intelligence coordination and security oversight. A plaque by the door read, "In recognition of the ordinary citizens whose extraordinary courage protects American democracy." Jake Morrison had discovered that sometimes the most important decisions in history are made not by the powerful and influential, but by people who nobody expects to matter, until the moment when everything depends on their willingness to do what's right. The nobody from the basement had become somebody who changed the world, not through ambition or design, but through the simple recognition that some responsibilities cannot be avoided, no matter how invisible you think you are. 5 years after the Montana raid, Jake received an unexpected visitor at his new office in the FAA Intelligence Coordination Center. A young woman in her early 20s knocked on his door, introducing herself as Sarah Chen, Agent Chen's daughter, who had just graduated from Georgetown University with a degree in criminal justice. "Mr. Morrison, my mother told me I should meet you before I start at the FBI Academy," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "She said you taught her something important about the difference between following orders and following conscience." Jake smiled, remembering the late-night phone call that had started everything. "Your mother was the one who knew how to turn information into action. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Sarah shook her head. "That's not how she tells it. She said you had a choice between staying invisible and risking everything to do what was right. And that choice is what every federal agent faces at some point in their career." Their conversation was interrupted by Jake's secure phone. The caller ID showed FBI Counterterrorism Division, a reminder that his role in exposing the bioweapons conspiracy had led to ongoing responsibilities that extended far beyond air traffic control. "Morrison here," he answered, immediately shifting into the professional mode that had become second nature. "Jake, this is Agent Williams from the Biological Threat Assessment Unit. We've got a situation developing in Nevada that matches some of the patterns from the Montana case. Can you review flight manifests for the past week and look for anything unusual?" Jake accessed his classified databases while Sarah watched, impressed by the sophisticated intelligence systems that had grown from the reforms implemented after the conspiracy was exposed. Multiple screens displayed real-time flight tracking, passenger manifests, and cross-reference security alerts that would have been impossible to coordinate before the Montana investigation. "I'm seeing several flights from pharmaceutical executives to a private airfield near Reno," Jake reported after analyzing the data. 3 different companies, but they're all subsidiaries of corporations that had indirect connections to the original conspiracy network. "We thought so. Can you coordinate with our surveillance teams? We may need real-time tracking support if this develops into another operation." After ending the call, Jake turned back to Sarah. "That's the reality of this job now. The Montana case wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that we're still uncovering years later." Sarah leaned forward, intrigued by the ongoing complexity of the work. "How many other cases have there been?" Jake pulled up a classified briefing document on his screen. "Officially, I can't discuss specific operations, but I can tell you that the intelligence sharing protocols we developed have helped prevent at least 7 major security breaches in the past 5 years. Everything from human trafficking networks using diplomatic flights to weapons smuggling operations disguised as corporate travel." He gestured toward a wall map showing highlighted flight corridors across the United States. "What we learned from the Montana case is that transportation systems are crucial vulnerability points for national security. People who want to commit crimes or escape justice have to move from place to place, and that movement creates intelligence opportunities for people who know how to recognize the patterns." Sarah studied the map, noting the concentration of marked routes around major airports and government facilities. "My mother said you turned down offers to work directly for the FBI or CIA. Why stay with the FAA?" Jake considered the question, thinking about the career choices that had led him from a basement office to his current position. Because this is where the information converges. Air traffic control systems see everything: military movements, diplomatic flights, corporate travel, private aircraft. The FBI investigates specific crimes. The CIA focuses on foreign threats. But air traffic control sees the complete picture of how people and resources move through the country. He pulled up another screen showing real-time aircraft positions across the continental United States. Right now, there are over 4,000 aircraft in American airspace. Most of them are routine commercial flights or general aviation, but some of them represent threats that we won't recognize until we analyze the patterns. Sarah asked about the personal cost of the visibility that had come with the Montana case. How do you handle being recognized everywhere you go? My mother said the publicity changed your life completely. Jake nodded, remembering the media attention that had followed the congressional hearings. It was difficult at first. I'd spent my entire career being invisible, and suddenly I was testifying on national television and giving interviews to newspapers around the world. But I realized that visibility came with opportunities to make changes that wouldn't have been possible from the basement. He showed her photographs from speaking engagements at federal training facilities and university criminal justice programs. I've been able to influence how new agents and analysts think about intelligence sharing and interagency cooperation. The reforms that came out of the Montana case are only effective if the people implementing them understand why they matter. Sarah examined the photos, noting the diverse audiences of federal employees, military personnel, and academic researchers. What's the most important thing you tell them? That expertise and authority aren't the same thing, Jake replied. The Montana conspiracy succeeded for years because people assumed that someone else with more authority was handling oversight. Everyone involved had expertise in their specific area, but no one felt authorized to question activities outside their immediate responsibilities. He pulled up training materials he had developed for federal employees. What I try to teach is that information creates responsibility. If you have access to classified data, and you see patterns that suggest criminal activity, you have both the authority and the obligation to report it, regardless of who might be involved. Sarah spent the rest of the day observing Jake's work, watching him coordinate with FBI surveillance teams, analyze flight patterns for suspicious activity, and provide real-time intelligence support for ongoing operations. She saw firsthand how the reforms implemented after the Montana case had created new opportunities for preventing criminal activity before it could develop into major conspiracies. Later that afternoon, Jake received a secure message from the State Department's Bureau of Diplomatic Security. An international weapons dealer with connections to the original bioweapons network was planning to fly from Mexico to a private airfield in Texas, and federal agencies needed coordination support for surveillance and interdiction. This is exactly the kind of case that would have slipped through the cracks before Montana, Jake explained to Sarah as he coordinated with multiple agencies. The weapons dealer has diplomatic immunity, so the FBI can't arrest him directly. But if we can document his connections to ongoing criminal networks, State Department can revoke his diplomatic status and authorize prosecution. Sarah watched Jake manage communications between FBI counterterrorism agents, DEA investigators tracking drug trafficking connections, and Customs and Border Protection officials preparing interdiction procedures. The coordination required understanding of legal authorities, operational capabilities, and intelligence protocols that crossed multiple agencies and jurisdictions. Your mother was right, Sarah said as they finished coordinating the operation. This job really is about choosing between following procedures and following conscience. Jake looked out his office window at the aircraft approaching Reagan National Airport, thinking about all the flights he had tracked over the years and all the decisions that had shaped both his career and American national security. The difference is that now we have procedures that support conscience, he replied. The Montana case taught us that preventing major crimes requires people at every level to feel empowered to act on what they know, even when that action might be uncomfortable for the people above them. As Sarah prepared to leave for her final interview at the FBI Academy, Jake gave her a piece of advice that had grown from his experience in the basement office and the years that followed. Remember that the most important intelligence often comes from people who don't think they have anything important to report. The key is creating systems that encourage everyone to share what they know, and then having analysts who can recognize patterns that might not be obvious to the people providing the information. Sarah Chen would go on to become one of the FBI's most effective counterterrorism analysts, specializing in the kind of interagency coordination that had made the Montana operation successful. Years later, she would credit Jake Morrison with teaching her that effective intelligence work required both technical expertise and moral courage. The basement office where Jake had been invisible was eventually expanded into a full intelligence coordination center that served as a model for similar facilities at airports across the country. The center processed over 1 million flight clearances annually while maintaining surveillance for suspicious patterns that might indicate criminal activity. Jake Morrison had discovered that changing the world didn't require being extraordinary. It required being ordinary people who refused to ignore extraordinary circumstances, even when recognizing those circumstances came with risks that could change everything. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.